final edition of the three-part series. And today we are going to focus on how can we create a robust research ecosystem in our institutions of higher education. We have an excellent panel, both from India and from the United States, who would be providing their inputs on the issues of research and challenges that our higher education institutions are facing in terms of creating the right kind of research ecosystem which can be comparable with institutions which are highly ranked across the world. What is it that Indian institutions need to do to come right up there and have their names listed alongside the best institutions, say, in the United States or other parts of the world? As I said, we have an excellent panel with us here today, but any panel is only as good as a strong moderator to move the discussion around. And so we are lucky to have with us our own Mr. Sriram Kari from Hyderabad. As you all know, many of you would have already read him, heard him speak. He's a great orator. I've heard him several times, but he was also a novelist, and in his current avatar as the resident editor of the Deccan Chronicle here is also a journalist. Sriram wrote his debut novel called The Autobiography of a Mad Nation, which was longlisted for the Man Asian Literary Prize and bestseller. His first book, The Spiritual Supermarket, was longlisted for a Crossword Book Award in the non-fiction category. And his next novel, which is titled One Farmer Less, is currently in publication. Apart from the fact that Sriram is the resident editor for the Deccan Chronicle, he has also written for the New York Times, The Guardian, BBC, Huffington Post, Asia Times, the Economic Times, the New Indian Express, the Hindu, First Post, Scroll, The Wire, Rediff, the Print, Khalij Times, the Asian Age, and there are several others. I'm pretty sure that you all have read in publications around the world. So without much ado, I will hand over the responsibilities of taking this conversation, which I am absolutely sure is going to be very engaging, and of course give us some insights and a path forward on what can be done to make our universities come up to international standards when it comes to research. Over to you, Sriram.
Thank you so much, Salil. Very kind of you, both the opportunity to be part of a panel, both in terms of the topic that it wishes to engage with, as well as the stature and diversity of the panelists. I couldn't be more honored, more thrilled, or more nervous in trying to take this discussion forward in terms of engaging these fascinating, illustrious thinkers and experts on different facets of the topic. The topic, been stated very broadly in a way, is about creating this research ecosystem in this country. Before I do that, I'll of course introduce you in some detail each of the panelists. I'll begin with Professor Charles Dhanraj. Professor Charles Dhanraj is the Evelyn and J. Pisnadi Endowed Chair at the University of Denver Daniel School College of Business. He comes from the Temple University, where he was at the Fox School of Business as a professor of strategy. His CV runs possibly a collection of, looks like a list of, I don't know, some of the greatest names we can think about. He's also been strongly associated with the Indian School of Business, besides the Kellogg School of Business, Copenhagen Business School, where he's a visiting professor. His research has fundamentally been about strategies for leaders and organizations, being purpose-driven and crafting those strategies that help them win. And how do organizations create sustained value from global partnerships? And of course, finally, how do entrepreneurs and business leaders orchestrate these networks for growth? Since partnership will be a crucial dimension in creating research ecosystem, he will add a lot of value, and I hope those people who will be responsible eventually in shaping this country in different levels will listen very carefully to him. Earlier, of course, in his resume, he was an IIT engineer from Madras with a master's degree in robotics engineering, and then he earned his PhD from the Ivy Business School, Canada. And he's, before joining academics, been with the Tata Group. So he also has a very deep, direct sense of industry as well. Thank you, Professor Charles Zenraj. I look forward to asking you several questions and, more importantly, listening what would otherwise mean impossible for somebody like me, because I will have to go through that exam and interview which would make me a student of yours. And I'm sure I couldn't get through. But today I get to listen to a professor like you, your insight, your wisdom. I look forward to it. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Sriram.
Thank you, sir. I also have Professor Patrick Mcnamara. He's the Director of International Studies, University of Nebraska, Omaha. Professor Mcnamara serves as the Interim Director of International Programs. He's also the Director of the Shaw Center for Jewish Studies and the Middle East. So fascinating sense of conflict resolution, negotiation, facilitation, development, social entrepreneurship, civic leadership. So he's somebody who combines with, from an academic perspective, but very, very real subjects, real politics involving history, culture, sociology, and possibly ways for making a better future for a very, very important region in the world. He received his PhD from the School of Public Administration, University of Nebraska. And he has, of course, done several researches. He's consulted with over 300 organizations from MNCs, corporates, small-scale nonprofits. And he has done several jobs whose roles include overseeing grants, advising donors, community development, and a project to combat hate crimes. That would sound very interesting on a different subject some other day. He's also worked at a Wall Street firm, worked in a congressional page in the US House of Representatives, and he's originally from Portland, Oregon, but he has done workshops and consulted and worked in, besides the United States, South Africa, Vietnam, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Switzerland, and UK. Is there any reason you left out an odd country, Professor Mcnamara? Didn't have, but what a pleasure to be here with you, sir.
India is my second home, and I love being virtually in India. I only wish that I was there in person now.
How we wish that would have been a delight, but China wills otherwise. And that I said just because you're from Nebraska and I know where that state went. And now I'll move to the Dean of the Indian School of Business, Professor Rajendra Srivastava. Not just in Hyderabad or Gurgaon or any online seminar related to education, related to research, Professor Rajendra Srivastava wouldn't require a very lengthy introduction. People know him, but I nevertheless, besides the Dean of the Indian School of Business and the Novartis Professor of Marketing Strategy and Innovation, he brings over 3 decades of experience as an academic and an administrator of institutions. He has held several tenured faculty and admin positions, and before the HEIs, he was the Provost and Deputy President of Academic Affairs at the Singapore Management University. His broad research interests include marketing strategy, marketing metrics, brand and consumer management, and he's a highly cited scholar with citations and quotes in various leading marketing journals across the world, recipient of several awards and honors, and he's actively involved in setting up of a new postgrad and doctoral programs besides research centers. I repeat, besides research center, and several industry collaborative initiatives at the ISB and before that. And he's also held jobs of research chairing and senior management position at the University of Texas at Austin and the Emory University in Atlanta. Professor Rajendra Srivastav, Dean, Indian School of Business.
Thank you, Sriram.
And I must tell you, sir, that lots of people have been reaching out to me on LinkedIn saying, are you very close to the Dean of ISB? We are going to send our application later this year. Please figure out what works. So
I think our applications are up about 50%. Thanks to you, Sriram.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, very briefly, I'll move from the academic, research, and industry work, collaboration, consulting. I'll move to a very different kind of a profile. And this is Professor Ram Mohan Rao. Professor Ram Mohan Rao, as if you look at the original list, is not the scheduled listed speaker. He replaces his boss, Professor Ramachandra Reddy, who's been invited by the Chief Minister for an urgent meeting. So we have a briefer profile. He's a retired Professor of Commerce and Management from the Andhra University and is currently the Vice Chairman of the Andhra Pradesh State Council of Higher Education, APSHI as it's called. And therefore, he represents the government in a sense, that sense of law, sense of government, sense of public, sense of statutory in this particular. Now I'll go to the, if I may, most important speaker of the evening for a variety of reasons, the least of which is he's an extremely successful entrepreneur, very well-known name in business landscape in India, known globally for her work, but her profile is fascinating. I mean, I knew her all my life. I've never met her, never spoken to her, only been seeing her in business pages and business newspapers. But I was pretty overawed to read the profile today formally of Vanitha Datla, the Vice Chairman and MD, Helico Limited. Besides the fact that she's a speaker, she's known in academic fora. I'm told she's currently doing a doctoral program at the ISB itself. But what she's most passionate about is women empowerment and women issues. She's created something called the Women in Network, or WIN. She's a part of the founding team, an NGO that works children in slums and has done extraordinarily good work. She's also been on several industry panels, including the CII, the HEIs, Business School Alumni Federation. She believes basically on one hand that industry must make a contribution in its own humble ways or to societies more subaltern, underprivileged on the one side. On the other hand, she believes there's a need for academic industry interaction, and therefore she's also part of several other colleges, etc. But on the other side, as a person, she's a fitness freak, as this profile reads. I'm not calling her a freak, but passionate champion about sports. She has participated in, these numbers are crazy. 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers, and 200-kilometer bicycle rides. I mean, why? You surely must have a car, right? And I mean, she does full marathons, half marathons, 50-kilometer ultra marathon. You are going to put a lot of people to either shame or extreme inspiration to get on wear their jogging shoes from tomorrow. I'm one of them. She's also learned to play the veena, the piano, the classical Carnatic vocal at an early age. She practices Vedic chanting, music. I won't even ask you how we managed to do all this. She has traveled to over 50 countries. Travel remains a passion. This year, she's only been zooming to all these countries virtually, but come next year, she will be back to business. So with this, I'm sure I have everybody's attention. What a extraordinary panel we have and get to the topic itself. Just close your eyes for a minute, each one of you, and try and visualize this. 50 years from today, when the Swedish committee starts announcing Nobel Prizes in physics, in chemistry, in medicine, in economics, maybe there'll be teams of people from India who will win it. I'm not saying Indians. Maybe there'll be scientists from different countries in the world, from America, from South America, from Africa, from Asia, from Middle East, working in institutions, in labs, in companies in India. Their work would get that kind of renown that they'll get the Nobel Prizes. Think of 50 years from now, parents in different countries in the world, maybe about 150 odd countries, since the time the child is born, saying, I hope one day you go and study in this extraordinary university in Hyderabad or Vijayawada, Amravati, because we have somebody from AP, I'm adding Vijayawada. It was not part of my script. This is the point of a nation's exceptionalism. 4 years ago, I was invited to Dhaka to moderate a panel discussion on, is the American exceptionalism over? It had a very strong political point. I will not push that beyond because the US Consulate is the organizer of this, but overwhelmingly, the opinion of about 8 speakers and 2,000 people in the audience was American exceptionalism is not defined or even impacted beyond a point by its politics, but by its universities, by its socio-cultural freedoms and values, of course. But across the world, parents must be saying to their children, I hope someday you go to a Harvard. I hope someday you go to a Kellogg. Someday you study in Princeton, in Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yes, I'm proud today that ISB, which is the other partner of this event, has started making that kind of a breakthrough. Great professors come from across the world to teach here, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm really asking you to think of a country that gets transformed because the best brains on earth can come here, do work that will define and change the world. It could be in educational institutions. It could be in laboratories set up by the government, by the private sector, by collaborative effort. Those are all detailing. But today, we as a country do not matter in research beyond the point. We don't. We really don't. We have not had a single Nobel Prize laureate in physics, chemistry, medicine, economics, or literature since independence. Let this sink in. So no Indian in the field of physics, chemistry, medicine, economics. I mean, it's not a Nobel Prize, a medal, but nevertheless, you know what I mean. And there has been no great original theory in any discipline of human endeavor from this country in the last 5 decades or more. But before I ask my first question to the panelists and let them take it from there, I'd like to give you a small formula. You must all have heard about this formula called E is equal to mc square. The moment I say it, you visualize Albert Einstein. Now visualize this formula. E to the power I into pi minus 1 equals 0. You know what E is? You know I, an imaginary number under root of minus 1. You know pi is the proportion between the diameter and the circumference, 1 and 0. 5 magical numbers. This was a formula discovered in India 1200 BC. Let that sink in. So there was a country called India once where people had curiosity, passion, wanted to discover the truth of stars, wanted to understand the universe, wanted to do ungodly transgressions into the secrets of the world and beyond. Somewhere we have lost it. How do we regain it? I think in some perspective, that is what this topic is all about. So I will go to you, Professor Charles Dhanraj. And I ask you, how do you define a world-class research ecosystem? What are the pieces that go on to make America this extraordinary country where the best minds on earth want to go study, go to work, contribute to their research and progress the development of thought? And if you want to fix this system or almost rebuild it completely from scratch, where do you begin? Professor Charles Dhanraj.
Wow, thank you, Sriram. That was a phenomenal kickoff to the seminar. I think the road, the 1,000 miles journey begins with the first step, right? So I think on the one hand, we aspire and want to be one of the world's leading research institution. And all that begins with where do we start? And I think to some extent, I go back to Indian School of Business in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And my background is in management and business, and I think social sciences would be the area where I will focus on for my discussion. And I think what ISB did was to bring a research culture into the business schools. And in fact, I've done several visits to multiple IIMs and stuff. And we have never had that culture of research. And ISB, to some extent, took that extraordinary step of conceiving that you can build a strong research-based institution in India. So to that extent, hats off to ISB. And now, if you look at the management schools in India in general, there is no IIMs that does not have the emphasis on research. So within a matter of 2 decades, we have transformed the management schools to think of research as the predominant thing. In fact, if we go back in 2000, we had a study of number of business articles that have been published in FT 50 journals, like the Financial Times 50 journals, by scholars based in Indian institutions. And we couldn't count more than 10. It was a single-digit number. That was 1999-2000 time. And if you look at today, we are almost hitting consistently about 100 plus articles from Indian scholars in all the top journals. In fact, I would venture to say there is no top journal that is coming out where at least there is one article per year from a scholar from India. So that's a substantive move that we have made. And I think that there's a message from there, like, so you can transform institutions and you can move. So that's a thing that I would start from, number one. And number two, the question that you asked, what does it take to build a strong set of institution? I think fundamentally research is not a solo enterprise, right? Research is so communal in the sense it takes the proverb, it takes a village to raise a kid. It takes multiple systems to think about raising one research scholar. So that's where today's discussion of ecosystem is important. A lot of times we think about research as it's all about money, creating resources, dollars or rupees for research. Important as it is only one aspect of it, right? I think what I would maybe touch on 4 points, and I leave to this, Sriram. One is data. I mean, a good research requires good data. And this is where we can do a lot. I mean, an ecosystem is about creating access to data, creating for researchers to ask good questions and to test out those good questions, they need access to data. And if you look at in India, for example, the CMIE, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, that was a phenomenal invention within India, which has come up Now we have pretty much data comparable to CompuStat that we can get from CMIE. So how do we build this tradition even more? We have so much, I mean, Indian Statistical Institute, economic surveys, they're all coming up with multiple data. How do we create central data ponds so that researchers can have access? So data is number one. Number two, research builds on conversations. And I think the very example that we are now doing is this, the whole availability of the Zoom and stuff. So geography is no boundary. You are able to bring uh, people across the world and able to have. So how do we institutionalize this? Because most of research ideas generate when people are talking. It's not sure there are a lot of ideas that you come up when you are sitting alone and you are thinking about it or you're meditating and you come up with it. But a lot of these good ideas come in the conversations. So the more we are able to create this conversations, that will be a wonderful one. So I envision, in fact, Raj and I have been thinking of pushing the idea of a national development center for business school faculties. Is there a possibility even once in a month we have a global webinar that brings some of the top minds together and think about research? And how do we use technology to train researchers to get the access to the best of the stuff, right? And the third one, which is the critical one, which at this stage, which we need from industry is, I'm glad Vanita is here, we need access to industry. I mean, researchers cannot engage and ask good questions if they don't have access to industry. So can we find strong executive support and open corridors for faculty so that they can engage with industry and move forward? One of the promising thing now is what we call as executive doctoral program that is coming up, and ISP is being one of the few institutions that is driving it. So we are seeing executives come and do PhD. So now this is going to open a lot more gateways. So access to industry must open up a lot more. And finally, the last one is supportive culture, right? I mean, you started with the Nobel Prize, and I always go back to Ramanujam's story, right? Ramanujam, the one of the breakthrough mathematician, and you alluded to the pi and stuff. And if you really look at what really brought the best out of Ramanujam was the partnership between Professor Hardy and Professor Neville, right? I mean, it takes somebody to discover the genius and bring out the genius out of that person. But for Hardy and Neville, we would not be hearing about Ramanujam today, right? So how do we develop a culture of supportive scholars who will see the brilliant minds that are coming up and not see them as competition, but see them as someone that they would be dedicated to develop and build up, right? In fact, I think the last few months we have been pushing this idea of Editors Guild 100, like the same thing what we have seen from 2000 to 2020, we have gone to FT50 articles 100. Now, what would it take for us in the next decade to create 100 gatekeepers, people who would be in the editorial research boards, review boards, to shape the research? So you can't build an ecosystem until we are able to create a strong set of gatekeepers. So I'll stop there. So data, the conversations, the access to industry, and a supportive culture. I'll refer back to you, Sriram. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dhanraj. Very interesting points. He's put the broad blocks from where to build. One of the things, and I could be very wrong, I'm somebody who's not, I've never seen the inside of the university as a student, I must confess. Sometimes, it's very embarrassing when I go to these seminars and people begin saying doc and they stop in the Mr. Sriram Kari. So no doctor, no master, just a plain graduate, absolute lowest strata, basic unit of Indian education at college of the lowest order. So not really something worthwhile, but I have therefore an outside the academia perspective that research requires an extraordinary passion, a great desire to look at something and say, I will perhaps devote my life to finding an answer to this question. Perhaps if my life is spent in solving this problem, my life is worth it. But that problem is so enamoring, so enchanting. I don't go to sleep. This is my mindset. I could be very wrong. I'll go to Professor and Dean Rajen Srivastava. When you get students at the ISB, at the postgraduate level, do you see them consumed by this kind of a passion? Or do they come and say, and I know that you only speak of management education, we'll extrapolate from there for sciences, etc., and we'll get industry and government perspective in a bit. But do you see passion to do extraordinary things, or is it like, I go to ISB, I'll get a good job, life will be great? And has it changed in the last 2 decades or so of your interacting with students 20 years ago, previous millennium, last decade now?
Let me pick up where Charles left off. He mentioned a program called Executive Fellows Program. And this program, the average student or participant is coming in with 22 years of experience. We've got chief operating officers, chief marketing officers. These are people with passion. They are not there because they hope to come there and get a job after this. They already have a great job, and they're looking for ways that they can contribute. And so this is an extraordinary group, and no disrespect to my previous institutions. I will take this group and put them up against any school in the world that I have been at. And I've taught in Europe at London Business School and Helsinki School of Economics, now Aalto University. I've US, of course, and Singapore. But this group of students, they are there because of passion, let me put it that way. And they are smart to begin with. They've already achieved a lot in the business community. So that's one. The second thing I want to put things in a context. ISB is a management school, and what keeps us ticking. Charles also mentioned research, coming out of ISB. We are very lucky to have a mix of visiting scholars and residential scholars. The number of residential scholars has gone up dramatically, almost doubled in the last 5 years that I've been there. But there's a very little known fact about the residential scholars. When you look at ISB faculty, research productivity in the leading journals, and I'm not talking about the FT50 now, I'm talking about the UT Dallas 24. If I go to the top 24 journals, ISB faculty on a per capita basis are number 20 in the world now. So we are no longer dragging the feet. We are way ahead of many, many well-known universities, at least in the management discipline. And I think ISB would have achieved a lot, and the partner schools that helped us get started, Kellogg School from Northwestern, Wharton from University of Pennsylvania, London Business School, etc., they will be really proud of us if we give them a run for their money. And we are kind of getting there. I'm not trying to, we have certain advantages here. And let me tell you what are some of the reasons for the advantage. India is, as my kids would say, it's a happening country. I mean, we have lots of problems to solve. If you're looking for a problem worth solving, you come to India. But we also have a lot of things going on. Whether we're looking at the automotive market or the digital space, or we're looking at education, lots of change is happening in India. And when change is happening, that creates data, which is what Charles was referring to. And it is the data that gives us insights into what could be done and what should be done, etc. Now, here we need the collaboration with industry, and I'm going to echo what Charles said, but I'm going to expand on it. One of my mentors was a person called George Kosmitsky. George was a co-founder, along with Singleton, for a company called Teledyne. And that's where he made his money, but he was also a PhD, and he was on the what was in the old days called Carnegie Institute of Technology, now Carnegie Mellon. And came as dean to the University of Texas. And he was instrumental in starting these ecosystems. I saw the word that, in the title of what we're going to talk about is ecosystems. He was instrumental in starting two entities. One was called Sematech, and this was a consortium of industry players to take on the Japanese in the semiconductor industry because Japan was running way ahead. And the other consortia he was involved in starting is called MCC, Microelectronics Computer Corporation, which was more software, and Sematech was hardware. And this is going back to Austin around 1980. And Austin has grown from 400,000, maybe 300,000 back then, to a city of 2.4 million. It's becoming a tech mecca where people are migrating to from California. And why is that happening? Because it's a great place for talent. And in order to nurture an ecosystem in education, you've got to nurture the talent, which starts with the students. And what George did was he worked with the government and he worked with industry, and the three-way partnership between government, industry, and academia has to take place. And this context is very important. The very first project where I worked on, where I achieved anything significant, was a project in robotics. It's interesting that some of us, came from engineering and are now in management. And this was with a company called Cincinnati Millicron. Now, for robotics, what did you need? You needed to understand computer science, all the control mechanisms there. You need to understand mechanical engineering because somebody has got to guide the robotics arm. And you need to understand the context, whether it is automotive manufacturing or it is manufacturing in the chemical industry. You need to understand the context within which it all has to be used. But you also need to understand the broader context. In that case, it was Japan versus the US. In Japan, a lot of industries were greenfield. In the US, to bring the robotics in, you had to compete with the legacy system. In India, we don't have to compete with the legacy system. Take education. We can absorb online education much faster than the US ever did. So we need to understand the context within which we're doing the research as well. So I would really encourage in India for us to work very closely with industry. And we could be, if we take a look at, let's say, pharma and healthcare, and we look at Hyderabad, where many of you are sitting, it's a gold mine. You got Dr. Reddy's lab, you got Apollo Hospital, you got LV Prasad Eye Hospital. We need to integrate industry and academia, and we need to integrate the government support for it. So I'm sorry you asked me a simple question and I gave you a long answer, and that's a big problem dealing with us academics.
Absolutely a delight to listen to you, and someday I learn to speak maybe 1% like you and sound more professorial. But thank you so much, Dean Srivastava. And I would hope someday this will be the common man's test thrown at ISB. Someday let the best minds of ISB show Hyderabad how to manage its traffic. Some beautiful insight, and we will all in the city applaud you. But we are very proud of you, and we're grateful that ISB was conceived of and was located in Hyderabad. Could have gone elsewhere, and I was a journalist those days and very delighted and proud. But yes, help us solve this traffic problem someday. And now I go to Professor Patrick Mcnamara, and I'll ask him to expand the scope of what we're discussing. It was reasonably convenient and easy for Professor Srivastava, Professor Charles and Raj, because industry, and I know there's an industry representative to tell me for what I'm going to say next, will be reasonably more eager to put money in management education. It's all one tribe. The MBA, the CEO, the board governor, and it's a beautiful ecosystem. already. They're very happy to sign, all the great CEOs and founders of these big companies. They are from Harvard, Stanford. They love writing checks to their own alums and have a chair with their name. And so management schools will get the money. But what about research in arts, in humanities, in cross-functional studies? Something that involves more than one stream. In India, interdisciplinary education is something like we believe, you're either an engineer or a doctor or an MBA or a lawyer or an architect or useless. So these are the 6 categories of education we have. So how do you bring this? And in primary sciences, in problems of society, do you see any change? Do you see hope? If not, where do we begin? Problem when you don't have anything is you don't even know where to begin. Do I set up 10 great universities? Do I begin at primary school? Should it come from the industry, or should we just look to government and then anyway nothing will happen? Professor Patrick Mcnamara.
Thank you. You're asking such a great question, and I think that cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary approach is really the future of academic research. We have to be thinking in ways not siloed in our own discipline, but in ways that connect the dots across these disciplines. And to me, that is the ecosystem of research that needs to be built. In some ways, this is building on Professor Dhanraj's earlier comments about research is not a solo venture, but it is a communal venture or a partnership that has to take place. And I really appreciated that comment. I'm going to talk about a specific project that I have been involved with in academic circles. We call it Principal Investigator. I'm the PI on a project called Partnership 2020, U.S.-India Higher Education Cooperation. This is out of the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, as well as the Bureau of South Central Asia in Washington, D.C., U.S. State Department. And we have 4 goals in this project. We're getting great advice and consultation from the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., great partners there. And we have built a website which has now, I believe, 220 partnerships between U.S. universities and Indian universities that are highlighted on an interactive map where you can literally click on on a state in India, on a state in the U.S., and see what partnerships exist in areas in those states. So this interactive website is the first goal. The second goal is a practical guide for university leaders on how to build successful partnerships. And that paper is about to be released later this month. A third goal is a policy recommendations guide for policymakers both in the U.S. and in India about what we can do from a policy perspective to strengthen partnerships. And fourth and finally, we are giving grants to U.S. universities to partner with Indian universities. There are 15 grants now given, and I'm going to briefly tell you about 3 of those. First, University of Missouri has received a grant in partnership with Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University in Kakinada in Andhra Pradesh. And their project is fintech. And in particular, they're looking at this blockchain and the way in which blockchain is revolutionizing the financial technology world. Secondly, and just to say a quick plug for my friends and colleagues at the U.S. Consulate in Hyderabad. Thank you for your advocacy and participation and partnership on this Partnership 2020, especially with with your region down there, which includes, of course, Andhra Pradesh. Secondly, Boston University is partnered with IIT Bombay. They are looking at renewable energy for using less water. In particular, they are looking at solar panels and a way to clean solar panels that does not use water. Of course, in many places, like Rajasthan, they have a lot of sun in the desert there, but they don't have as much water to clean. So this project is innovating a new cleaning technique for solar panels to make them more efficient. And the third project that I'd like to highlight is Miami University in Ohio, which is partnered with Christ University, Bangalore. And they are specifically looking at mental health issues for both slum dwellers in Bangalore, but also rural areas outside of Bangalore. And with COVID-19, they've shifted some of their focus to online mental health. Now, this is an area that India has not gotten greatly into yet, and that's telemedicine, and in particular, teletherapy. And so how can you use simple technologies to allow people to do therapy, especially given all of the stresses that we're feeling right now in this COVID era? So I'm highlighting these three examples of Partnership 2020 grants that we have given to be specific about the types of U.S.-India partnerships that we think are creating the ecosystem, big picture, for transforming education. So I'm going to stop there. I'll obviously take questions during the Q&A, but Sriram, you have something you want to ask or say?
One very specific question, because the starting point of this entire series, of which this is the third and last, is National Education Policy of India announced earlier in May. And one of the points it envisages, and I need a very quick sense of your feel of it. One of the things India has done for the first time is invited foreign universities to come and set campuses in India. Do you think universities in America would feel interested about an opportunity, or do they think now?
Yes, I think that there is great interest in this, but I think that the question mark is the implementation of the national education policy and what that looks like in a practical sense. Of course, there are permits that are going to have to be sought, and partnerships that are going to have to be institutional partnerships that are going to have to be negotiated. But I think that this is a great opening and a step forward in tightening these partnerships. I think many U.S. universities will be interested in exploring those possibilities. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you so much, Professor Mcnamara. That's a fantastic sense of answer. A lot of specific informations which make us feel optimistic. Some cutting edge work already being done. Go visit his website. I'm sure more college principals, deans would like to see more opportunities. Thanks to the US Consulate in Hyderabad, of course, for advocating. I believe as much as we become strategic partners in defense, as much as we are great democracies with shared values, nothing like academic partnership where the young and bright of these two countries come together to solve the problems of the world. While we say this, I will also tell everybody in the audience, some of you must be wondering, normally we ask for questions at the end, but I am not going to wait for the end to ask questions. So you can start shooting your comments, your questions. You can direct them to specifically a Professor Dhanraj or a Professor Mcnamara or Dean Srivastava or Professor Ram Mohan Rao or Madam Vinita Datlab, or you can ask it of more than one person. You can also make an insightful observation. I'll be happy to air it. Professor Ram Mohan Rao, while you are, in all fairness, a professor, a retired professor, an academic, I'm going to particularly villainize you a bit and ask you to represent the government. Now, all governments, as you know, are evil with some capacity to do good. The kind of things Professor Dhanraj has said, the kind of things Dean Srivastava has said, Professor Mcnamara has said, the kind of ecosystems they're talking about, the kind of game-changing opportunities that exist for thinkers, academics in both US and India, the collaborations and convergence with industry, solving practical problems. Does it all have anything of a resonance in the chambers of power when people who will decide for state governments or central government, when they meet? Do you think all these words exist inside? Do they care? And second thing I want to ask you specific. In India, from our primary school, we are taught that the next intelligent child in our class is a threat, is a rival. We have to work secretly and better that person to get into MSET, IIT, IIM, ISB, Harvard, GMAT, etc. All my life, I look at people around me as threats. How will I suddenly go into an ecosystem and say, oh, all of them are now my peers. I will research with them. I'll collaborate with them. I will find that voice to ask great questions and then find answers. Is it therefore a thought in the Indian education system to start this idea of collaboration, teamwork a little early? Professor Ramohan Rao.
Thank you, Sriram. I think fortune turned on my way today that I could be part of this, grabbing opportunity from my chairman, Professor K. Hamchandra Reddy. So you have given a very interesting lead right from the beginning to describe the research ecosystem and the situation in the country, what was in the past and what we have to look forward. So the status here is that we have more than 900 universities established in this country and more than 40,000 higher educational institutions working. So if you look at from the research perspective, I think only less than 5% of the institutions where you could see some research which can be rated qualitative. The 95% of the institutions, they are merely focusing and becoming only as teaching institutions. Research over the years in those institutions took a back seat, mostly because of the policy and support of the government and the kind of, say, demands from the society and the infrastructure and the career orientation drive, as you said, the engineering, the medicine, the law, the profession, that kind of orientation of that is given from the society, from parental issues. So we could not able to identify the potential researchers from among the students. That is the fact. So we had really some good researchers in the country, produced wonderful research. Very few names are there, but mostly they are self-dependent to a greater extent to find a place to catch up the high-end researchers in the world. So institutional support to transform a student to become a good researcher is almost missing at this present system. And at this stage, we got the new national education policy, which wanted to transform the universities in the country as research universities. And they wanted to see that the universities in the next few years, maybe a few decades, as like universities we had at Nalanda and Takshashila, that kind of universities. Now, how to handle this transformational change that we are visualizing to create a research orientation in the institutional setup. So the Charles Dhanraj sir and Patrick sir, all of them have identified that the industry institutional linkage is the key, because we can get support and also the need definition for research from industry. Unfortunately, in this country, the industry started believing themselves only. They never started believing the educational institutions. There is a mistrust between the two. Though educational institutions are propagating that we are open for say collaboration with industry, we are inviting industry like, and industry people also on platforms, they are talking that we are open to it and we wanted to collaborate with educational institutions, but nothing is happening because there is no trust in between. So that is one area which need to be addressed very seriously. The second thing is that from our side, when we took charge as the chairman or vice chairman of APSHI, we are working closely with the government, and we started say reforming the undergraduate education system at the beginning. So we have revised the curriculum for undergraduate education, and wherein we have introduced say a mandatory component of life skills, skill development courses, and skill enhancement courses. And we introduced now the 4-year degree program, undergraduate degree program, wherein the 4th year is allocated for research. So we wanted to divide the student group who wanted to take the career in industry or business or something, and those who wanted to become scientists, researchers like. So at that level. So the potential and the real motivated people can be, I say, drawn to this 4th year stream, and they will be permitted to join into PhD program right after completing the 4th year of the degree. So we have made, as Charles Dhanraj sir said, that the researcher should get connected to the society. Without that, the research is useless. I believe in that. So we have introduced a 2-month mandatory project that we called it community service project. So all the students should go to the neighborhood villages. They should understand the areas there in aligning with all governmental departments. So they study the water problems, they study the hygiene problems, they study the health problems, they study the population problems. Like, depending upon the choice of their career, if they are say BA graduates, they will see the relevant areas in the society. BCom, they will see the relevant areas in the society, and sciences, they will see the relevant areas in the society. Engineering also, we have made the community service project as a compulsory one. So we wanted to pick the people at that level to expose to the societal problems, industrial problems and all that, and create an interest in the minds of the students to pursue research as a career. And whether this is a big doubt in the minds of the students, can they make research as a career? And can they eke out the quality life with the research? That kind of confidence is not injected into the minds of the people because of the system that is prevalent now. So we have to inject it that way. So we are trying to connect with industry, all public sector, industrial establishments. We are trying to connect with it, with the college level education first and then university level. And say the private organizations, we are trying to connect with Confederation of Indian Industry, NASCOM, and many other organizations which are established in this country to generate the first level, primary level research, so that they can move forward and become an advanced researchers. So fortunately, the government say is very much supportive on that. They are accepting whatever we are proposing, and they wanted us to see that there is a marked change in the higher education system in the state, and Either one should be employable by industry or business or self-employed, or one should become a true researcher with what sir said, with passion to do research. That is the kind of approach we are going for it.
Thank you so much, Professor Rao, because this whole policy is new. We have to give your government and all the governments some time to make this work. But there'll be enormous number of questions that will come back to all of you within the government to give an answer to in times to come. But your words are very, very hope-giving. I go to Ms. Vinita Datla because if you don't demonize the government, then you put the ball in the industry's court. And academics time and again say, professors say, look, this industry is very clever. They will give all this like corporate social responsibility. This is also a brochure page, collaboration and research. They'll come take the best students to give them jobs, and then they'll put a chair or something out of pressure just because the professor is your professor. So you will write a check. But beyond the point, the industry doesn't believe its game-changing success can come from academics. Is it the failure of the colleges and universities to convince you that we can give you those products, services, process changes that will make you the winner, which will make the corporate interested? Or have the corporates not put in enough early faith to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy to get more from academics, make this kind of a collaborative research possible? Your views, please.
Thank you, Sriram. And while I do concur a lot with all the previous speakers on many of the points that they had made, one thing that Professor Ram Mohan Rao had said that I would like to differ is that the trust quotient between the university and the industry. I see that the trust deficit is not visible, especially from industry perspective, because we would like to definitely see quality students come out of every institute. In fact, let me give you an example of my own company. I run a 60-year-old company, and we are a pioneer in a very, very niche segment in India, in the analytical instrumentation domain. Now, if I want to hire people for my company, it is absolutely difficult to get qualified students who have the requisite technical knowledge. So that didn't mean that we just fold our hands and we feel bad about it, and then we just make do with the less than bright students. What we actually did is 2 decades back, we tied up with 3 universities, and 3 universities in 3 states of India. One is our own state of Telangana, one is of course Andhra Pradesh, and one university in Karnataka. So we worked with the departments. In one university, we worked with the Department of Physics because that is one of our domain knowledges. In one department or in one university, we worked with the instrumentation department. And in one university, we work with the Department of Chemistry, because analytical instrumentation itself is an interdisciplinary area. And the expertise that is required is from mechanical engineering, from chemical engineering, from chemistry, from physics, from optics, you name it, that engineering discipline expertise is required in our company. So when industry, and see, we are not a major player, if you look at worldwide, we do compete with the multinational companies. We are, after all, a medium-sized organization within the country. If a company like ours could actually approach 3 different universities and get tie-ups, and this was not done just because the NEP came. We have these tie-ups since the last 2 decades, and we have generated a wealth of IP in the form of patents, in the form of copyrights, design copyrights, trademarks, software copyrights. We have also sponsored research scholars who are on our rolls. And today I'm very proud to say that my husband is one of the PhD students from Sri Krishnadeva University of AP. And I have one from NIT Warangal, who's right now on the dissertation for a process part of it. We just had another student from Sri Krishna Devaraya University, a girl who finished her PhD thesis on a very, very subject-specific area of instrumentation. So we have already 3 in the pipeline, and we have 3 already completed. Looking at them, I realized that this lifelong learning is a must. And that's the reason that I myself enrolled, though not being a science student, I enrolled in the management side, and I joined the ISB as a doctoral student, an executive fellow of the program in management. So I believe that continuous learning is a must, whether in industry, whether in academia. And I can also go and give you another example of the university's perspective. My own family runs a very, very big educational society, where we've got close to about 40,000 students in a number of colleges, whether it is ranging from engineering to dental to pharmacy to computer applications and the general liberal arts. Now, near one of our university campuses, there is a small granite manufacturing company. And my brother was just talking to me the other day, and he was telling me that in the last 20 years of the existence of this engineering college, not a single professor, not a single teacher ever visited that company. So then we actually got a visiting professor from the United States who came to deliver a lecture for our students. And when he drove through the campus, he saw this industry and he said, "What is that industry? I would like to go and visit it." So then my brother took him across. It was a granite industry, and they actually they bring in granite slabs, they cut, they polish, and then they export this to other countries. So in the process of grinding the slabs of granite, there is a huge mountain of sludge that was visible there to this professor. So the professor, what he did is he picked up a handful of that sludge, brought it back to the campus, went to the chemistry lab, and asked our professors to analyze it. And then what came out was that there were so many iron particles, because when you're grinding, the grinding tool also wears off, and there is so much of iron that is lost from that and found into the sludge of the granite sludge. So they devised then as a project to remove the iron component from that sludge, and the amount that they were able to get value out of it was immense. So these are the small things, like Sriram was telling us. Today, when you go out into society, there are numerous problems, numerous issues that students who have time on their hands, that professors who have time on their hands can actually go and study it. From industry, since we are so engrossed in our own revenue making mechanisms and in our own business models, it becomes, we do not really work outside of what we are destined to be doing. But this is where I think in industry university collaborations can actually help. And I have been leading the Confederation of Indian Industry in the state of Telangana, and we made it a point to have numerous number of partnerships with a lot of the universities, with a lot of the regular colleges, because every student needs exposure in industry. We do allow for internships. We want faculty to come and visit colleges, visit companies, because then they understand what are the latest advancements that is happening in industry, what are the requirements of industry, what are the technological advancements that they can go back and teach their students. So I will just stop at that point, but there are numerous ways. I think the bottom line is, if there is a will, there will definitely be a way. And from industry, all of us are very, very happy that the NEP has come in today, because it removes a lot of the rigidity from the older thought process of education, cross-functional perspective approach, the teamwork approach, the interdisciplinary approach is what is required today in business and in industry. If this is addressed right from childhood, right from grade 1 or right from kindergarten, I'm sure that, see, today I have 2 granddaughters, one is just 3 and one is just a few weeks old. I'm sure that when they come to industry in about 20-25 years time, India would have changed. It would have be much better opportunities, especially for women too. And I know Sriram, I'm the only woman on this panel. the need for equity is also really necessary. And while it sort of goes out of focus for a lot of people, whichever area that we are discussing, whichever policies we are discussing, we need to bring an equitable society, and that is going to help us go out in the long run. So I'll stop there, Sriram.
I completely agree with you. When the poster for this event was sent to me, I forwarded it to my wife, and the first thing she said, one lady, that's it, all men, you have all the wisdom. So I know at this point of time, we would have ideally stopped and had a bought in Dave, but I'll hold him for 10 more minutes. I can ask a few questions. Some of you have given some very good comments and questions. I'll try and quickly incorporate them. And this question can go to Professor Charles Dhanraj. To what extent is quick results culture responsible for mediocre or average level of research in India? To what extent is quick results culture? This is by Maithili. And she says professors need to encourage and engage youngsters in conversation to encourage critical thinking, etc. Professor Charles Dhanraj.
Yeah, it is not an Indian problem. It is a universal problem. In fact, the dean of MIT, in fact, in 2007, wrote a fantastic article in Business Week titled, "Where is the B in Business Week?" Right? And one of his lament was the institutional incentives that are being devised are not allowing even senior scholars to get into problem-based research, because problem-based research require a protracted investment of time and quite often a long gestation period to come up with it. So this is a real issue that Maithili is pointing to, and this is where we need support. That's why the ecosystem is important, right? You have to look at research as a life cycle, right? There are certain things that you can do as an early startup scholar. I mean, in your year 1 to year 5, what you can do is maybe a very limited zone, whereas you can do something as a senior scholar, but 5 to 10 years or 10 to 15 years. So there is a different emphasis that different phases should bring to a researcher. So if that is recognized, then we can live. You need, for example, for a startup scholar, he or she has about, even in IIMs today, there is a 3-year cycle that they review, and you need 1 or 2 publications, right? So there is a sense of urgency, and that can be accomplished if these scholars can partner and work with senior scholars. So to some extent, we can get these short-term objectives if we have a good ecosystem.
My next question is for Dean Srivastava. You spoke about how ISB professors and students and Indians are contributing to the top 100 journals in the world, albeit in management. How many of these journals are Indian? When will Indian journals be so reputed that people across the world will want to contribute? This is for Dean Srivastava. And I'll request you to give me these quick 60-second answers so I can have as many questions covered. Sorry for this.
Thanks. So if we look at the management disciplines, whether finance, org behavior, marketing, a lot of the top journals have people on the editorial board, if not the editor of these journals. So the Indian diaspora is doing just fine. The question is, how do we get things started in India? People are going to look at an Indian journal for insights about what's going on in India. They're not going to ask for insights about the UK. So Charles and I actually, we've been both involved in a program called WebHub that's come out of the Prime Minister's office. And we have actually proposed a journal, a multidisciplinary journal that will focus on ideas coming from the East that will be used for the West. So it doesn't all have to be a flow from the West to the East.
Absolutely.
And so in the panel discussions that we had arranged for WebHub in the management field, we had 48 participants from around the world, 23 from India and the rest from outside. And if I took at all those panel members, I had an editorial board. And actually I proposed, Charles has more time than I have. So I've been trying to persuade Charles to take on some of this responsibility, but we can easily put a journal coming out of India. It's
That's
we're
fantastic.
going to need, we're just going to need a bit of support. These things don't happen for free. And so the government has a habit of saying, let's do this, but we need to put some money behind it, and maybe the money will come from industry aid. So, but
well, you preempted the next question from Varsha Chaudhary. Dean, this is a question for both Mr. Professor Rammohan Rao and Vinita Ratla. You will get just 60 seconds each to answer. India will not be able to expand the amount of money it spends on education in proportion to GDP as a percentage by a big way. Government will not pay, industry will not pay. Who will pay for overhauling the quality of education and extraordinarily quantum leaps in spend on research? Professor Rao to begin with, and then so government and then industry.
Yeah. So it is very much true that the amount that is spent on education from the government funds is very, very less compared to any other country. So in the NEP, it is proposed that it should be 6% on the GDP. But to look at the financial position of the central government and various state governments, they are unable to provide this much money. And one thing is that the higher education or the school education, whatever you call it, the major part of the institutions are from private sector, not from public sector. So private sector is investing on it, and the problem is they are more of a commercial orientation rather than the philanthropic orientation. That is one problem that we are facing. Now this, what the remedy that we can find is the industry supported educational institutions. If we can bring out such kind of nexus between these two, to focus on the outcomes that are useful to the industry for the employment level and also for the research level, that can make things positive for any state of the country. So
thank you so much, Professor Rao. Madam?
Yeah, so I'll just have one point to make, and we've been from the industry forum also requesting government needs to incentivize R&D in every firm, in every company, whether it's from the small sector, medium sector, or large. Today, only those players who have deep pockets do have their own in-house R&D centers. And so research needs to be incentivized. And I would also like to make an additional point here. Regarding the earlier question, in fact, we had another problem that we also did ask Rajendra Srivastava, the Dean. Today, when we are students of this doctoral program, and the cases that we study are all from the Western literature. So I, in fact, made that point to Dean, how come we don't have too many case studies from Eastern literature or from the Indian literature? So I guess this, this generation of the PhD students will have to start creating Indian case studies so that it becomes more relevant and more contextual for us.
I completely agree.
I think Dean would like to say,
yes, I wanted to go to Dean Rajan Srivastava to respond to this, please.
If I can make a comment, the case studies and the theory actually have to come from India, because the Indian context is very different, whether it is looking at diversity of population, economic diversity, cultural, linguistic. This is a very different country, and we can't embed things from the West. Also, the government has a very significant role in both education and commerce compared to the West, so we have to accommodate that as well. In terms of funding, there's enough money flowing out of India. There's 550,000 Indian students that go abroad, and they're spending money roughly about $50,000 a year. And there's about $27 billion going out of India. If we could get half of it to stay within India, because half of it is at least economic immigration, but the remaining half, let's say it's really for education. One of my, the first dean at ISP, Pramod Sinha, he's also a co-founder of Ashoka University. So I asked him, how much did Ashoka take to get off the ground? He said roughly about 100 million. And if we get 13 billion that is going out, we could start 130 Ashokas every year. Okay, so there's something, I'm serious, this ISB is not funded by the rich industrialists, the comment that you made in the beginning. Yeah, we got off the ground because of the help. And they said they would hire the first batch amongst themselves, which they did. But it is the ISB student that is paying for the research. So ISB research is not being, funded. I mean, there's some funding coming. I hold the Novartis chair, and that's the money that Novartis gave when we got started. But by and large, it is our students who are paying for this. And so there's enough money that's already flowing out of India. And for countries like Australia and UK and Canada, education is an export industry. We don't recognize that. But Australia is in a lot of trouble right now because of the China situation. And the Australian universities are panicking, and they're now looking at the Indian market. So, I mean, let's keep things in perspective. I think if the universities are allowed to be innovative, the universities will become innovative. And what we need is a lot more competition in Indian university system. And so we need more Plakshas, we need more Ashokas, we need more ISBs. We just need the government to let us become the Ashokas and Plakshas.
So I'm not supposed to say anything about the topic, so I will not say that. What I see as comment to ISB, what I see as comment to Ashoka is when government stays away, good things get done. But I'll not say that. I'll go with the last question to Professor Patrick Mcnamara. This is a question come from the Facebook part. The person asking the question is Soumyajit Bhattacharji. And Soumyajit Bhattacharji asks, how do you see in India, especially experimental research culture growing specific to behavioral labs, neuroscience labs, and such good, well-equipped labs? And is this lab very important to bring more people, attract more people as a way to research itself?
Yes, definitely. The labs are very important. And I'm going to expand that answer to say the infrastructure of Indian universities is one of the most important things that needs to be invested in. Of course, the talent, the professors and such, but if India is going to be on par with the internationally renowned universities, there needs to also be a huge investment in the infrastructure, including labs. That is going to then attract more international partnerships, more research professors, more students. I would like to see India become a destination for international students and have it be not a brain drain, but a brain gain for India, who will be attracting talent from all over. But one of the keys is the infrastructure investment, including labs. Thank you.
So absolutely, the end of it, we'll go to Dave for his comment in 1 minute. Just give me 30 last second, Kumar. In India, education is not for profit. This is how it's been since Gurukul time. Maybe the time has come to relook at education hubs like software export zones, where for-profit education come in, for-profit research can come in, etc. It's a thought. And most importantly, I'm sure if there is one Bollywood movie in which the hero is a research scholar, will make a lot more. Somebody says, I refuse to be a doctor or engineer because that's not cool. And the mother says, what will you earn as a research scholar? I said, don't worry, one day the Nobel Prize. And that will set it going. So I hope Bollywood and Tollywood and Mollywood make heroes of research scholars, of professors, of teachers, once again, like we did at the start of our country's inception as an independent nation. Thank you, everybody, for the great opportunity. I pass it to Kumar, who will then invite Dave to offer his word of thanks once again for the privilege of such extraordinary personalities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sriram. Before I request David to come online, I just want to say what a brilliant way to sort of end and round up this three-part series. And yes, why not? And you're speaking in Hyderabad, where Tollywood is headquartered. So I'm sure somebody is listening to this, and you have the power of the pen to make this happen. So Dave, over to you.
Thanks, Kumara. And this has been a really interesting opportunity for me. I'm relatively new to Hyderabad and to India. I'm not new to education exchange. I've been working on this for a number of years now. But India is definitely doing a far better job than many other countries. So I've learned a lot and I'm impressed. And hopefully we're poising the consulate to play an even more prominent role in facilitating these exchanges. Obviously, this could not have been possible without the great support from our good friends and colleagues at ISB. So again, to Dean Srivastava, thank you so much for your willingness to partner with the U.S. Consulate. We really appreciate your leadership and your friendship. And special thanks to Professor Ram Rohan Rao for stepping in at the last minute tonight and supporting your boss. We appreciate that. And of course, to Sri Ram for taking any topic that is given to you and making it far more entertaining than it would be otherwise. A great discussion as always. I just wanted to comment briefly on Vanita's example of the visiting scholar taking a fresh look at the granite site next to the university. To me, that exemplifies why we do exchanges. We want new perspectives and new ways of looking at things. And so whether it's an Indian scholar going to the United States and observing something new, or the reverse, this is what we're trying to do as the US government. This is what is at the heart of our public affairs work here in Hyderabad. And again, we can only make that possible through great partners and such as ISB and great international scholars as we had on the panel this evening. So on behalf of the US Consulate, thank you all, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you very much, David. I just want to offer my personal thanks as well to the US Consulate, to the Consul General, to you, and also if I can also identify Salil and Senthil for their sort of effort in making this happen. These things take, as sometimes, they say, especially in academia, it's conversations that leads to collaboration. So it's good to have friends with whom you can converse, and therefore that leads to collaboration and that leads to partnerships like this. People here on this panel in particular, and to the other panelists on the two previous editions, Charles, Vanita, Professor Ramon Rao Garu, and Sriram again, thank you. Raj, thank you very much for your support as always. You've been part of the first one and this, and for you to sort of, and I'm glad that we were able to get you on both the editions. Thank you very much for your support as always. On our end, I want to sort of thank Sridhar and Prashant and the other members of the team, Sandeep, Naman, and Nagaraj for their support. To all our participants who are very important, to those of you who have tuned in today and to the participants earlier, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll collaborate more and do more. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. And to our friends from the US, have a good day.